Take her away with her cursed bloodline and the bastard she's carrying in that belly. She's not useful here. At least she can be of use to you. She can join you to beg for arms. She's as useless as her late mother. Like her late mother, she's a wayward child. At just 13, this girl got pregnant and couldn't identify who's responsible for her pregnancy. She wants to disgrace this family because she's an orphan. But that would never happen. Take her away. She doesn't belong here anymore, and thank God your father is not around to shield you this time. That was the voice of her stepmother, Amara. She threw her few belongings to her and asked her to leave with the homeless man. Amaka never thought this day would come. She never thought she would be thrown out of her father's house like a piece of trash and married to a homeless man in the most unceremonious manner. But despite her crying and begging, no one to protect her, no one to say this is wrong. And the neighbors? They only stood in front of their houses. The few ones that came around only laughed and mocked her. She'd married off to a strange man, 8 months pregnant, the pregnancy having brought shame and humiliation to her. At 13 she saw her life slipping away from her, and at that moment, every hope, every dream she ever had ended, or so she thought. 8 months earlier, it was 10 p.m. in the evening. Amaka was already fast asleep and the community had worn its darkest color of the day. Her stepmother Amara suddenly jerked her up and gave her money to buy matches to be used the following day. Despite her protest that it was too late, Amara gave her a hot slap and chased her to the danger and sent her on the errand. As she walked a few minutes from her house, she suddenly felt a hand grab her, cover her mouth, and drag her away. What happened after that, she doesn't know. She only woke up to see herself inside the bush the following morning. Her clothes were torn, and she was seriously in pain. She could barely remember what transpired. All she remembered was that a hand grabbed her on her way last night, but when she carefully checked herself, she discovered she had been abused. She cried home, but immediately her stepmother saw her. She gave her a hot slap that made her collapse to the ground. You useless child. I sent you on an errand and you have the guts to run away with a man, coming back this morning with fake tears and torn clothes. She beat her more, not allowing her to express herself. Her father, Mr. Andrew, was working on a construction site far up north and he wouldn't be back for months. He had no idea what was happening. Amaka knew there was no help coming from anywhere and had to endure the pain till her body collapsed. But a few months later, the unthinkable happened. Amaka started having nausea and sleeping too easily. And when her stepmother noticed, she dragged her to the hospital and was told the girl was pregnant. It was beaten from the hospital till they reached the house. And she quickly gathered the neighbors to tell them, look at this little brat. Just like her late mother, she's pregnant and she doesn't even know who's responsible. But she wouldn't disgrace this family any further. I will definitely give her out in marriage. I will find one of these homeless people and give her to him. At least she could be useful to such a man. They can be going around begging for arms. Amaka knew that day that her childhood had ended and every hope left for her had been shattered. Every night she secretly prayed for her father to return back, at least to save her, but he never did. He's in the far away up north for a construction project and because she didn't have a mobile phone, she couldn't speak with him. But Amaka still remembered how her mother died. Her late mother Adana is the second wife of Mr. Andrew. Amaka was barely 10 when she dreamt that her stepmother poisoned her mother's food and her mother died from the food poisoning. That morning she woke up crying, begging her mother not to eat Amara's food anymore. But her mother, an easygoing woman, believed Amaka was just being a child. And that morning, after eating the food given to her by Amara, Amaka returned to see her mother rolling on the floor with a white forming substance and pointed at the food, shouting, Amara gave me the food. You warned me. You warned me. And died instantly. That was the beginning of her woes. Amara knows she knew she was the one that killed her mother and she has been trying to also get rid of her and this pregnancy. It's an opportunity to send her away. Now Amaka was heavily pregnant, with 8 months gone. One early morning, Amaka was lying curled up on the cold concrete floor of the living room, a thin mat barely separating her from the chill of the ground. Her body felt heavy from exhaustion, both physically and emotionally. She heard a knock on the door. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the uncertainty of her future looming over her like a dark cloud. And then the door flew open with a sharp creak. A figure stood in the doorway. Her stepmother, Amara. Her face was a mask of anger and cruelty. Her eyes narrowed as she stormed into the room. She jerked her up from the small mat she was sleeping on in the small living room. Come out. Today is your wedding. I found a homeless man to take you away and stop embarrassing this family. Amaka's heart sank. She had been expecting this. After all, her life had been a series of cruel events orchestrated by this woman, but she had never imagined it would come to this. Her own stepmother, the one who was supposed to care for her, was about to send her away, to throw her out like a piece of trash. She quickly gathered a few neighbors like her. And despite her crying and protest, she gave her out to the stranger, a man she never knew and doesn't know where he lives, and told him to take her away and never return. Her stepmother was holding a small bundle of her belongings, carelessly tossed into a ragged old bag. Amara shoved it into Amaka's hands with a force that made her stumble backward. Take your cursed bloodline and the bastard you're carrying in that belly and get out, Amara spat, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. You're no longer welcome here. Go and find somewhere else to rot like your late mother did. Useless just like her. Amaka's vision blurred with tears. She had never felt so alone, so abandoned. Amaka couldn't bring herself to speak. Her throat was tight with the weight of the words she couldn't say, the pleadings that fell on deaf ears. She had always been the one to bear the pain in silence. Now that silence would be her only companion as she was cast out from the only home she had known. With a cruel laugh, Amara pushed her toward the door. Go on, go to that worthless man you've been paired with, a homeless beggar who will take you in. At least you'll be useful to him. You can go beg for alms together just like the worthless child you are. Amaka's heart shattered as she stepped outside the door. The early morning air hit her with the sting of reality. She was 13 years old, heavily pregnant and now married to a homeless man. A tear slid down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She had no one to help her, no one to protect her from the cruel world that seemed intent on destroying her. Here, Amura said, pushing her toward him. Your new husband. The word felt foreign to Amaka's ears, husband. She was just a child. She had barely begun to understand life, let alone marriage, but it was clear now her stepmother had made a decision for her and there was no turning back. The homeless man who introduced himself as David didn't speak for a moment. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. Amaka felt a wave of fear wash over her. Who was he? What would happen to her now? He was a stranger to her. She had never seen him before in her life. His clothes were ragged, his hair unkempt and his face was worn from the hardships of life. But his eyes, though tired, held a spark of something. Amaka couldn't tell if it was kindness or pity. But she couldn't afford to care. But Amaka wasn't just any orphan. She had her memories, her strength, and the hope that someday someone would see the truth, someone would know the suffering she had endured. David motioned for her to follow him, and though she was terrified, she had no choice but to obey. She glanced back at the village, her home that she would never see again, and whispered a silent prayer. As she trudged away with her new husband, her feet dragging on the dusty road, she could hear the muffled laughter of the neighbors who had gathered outside their homes. Some pointed at her, mocking her. Others just watched in silence, unwilling to lift a finger to help. God, don't let this be the end of my story, she muttered under her breath. Change this for good. Let Amara kneel before me someday. She had always known the world was cruel, but now it felt like it had completely turned its back on her. They walked for what felt like hours, her stomach heavy with the child inside her, her body aching from the exhaustion of the day. Eventually, they reached the outskirts of the village. With that, Amaka walked away from the life she had known, unsure of where she was going or what her future held. But what Amaka didn't know was that her story was far from over. Amaka couldn't help but wonder where David was taking her. The uncertainty hit at her, but she couldn't ask him. What could she say? Where are you taking me? It seemed like a question she had no right to ask. But then, just when she thought she might collapse from exhaustion, David stopped. Come on, he said softly, his voice barely audible over the rustling of the trees. We're almost there. Amaka didn't ask any more questions. She didn't have the energy to care. Whatever awaited her at the end of this journey, she would face it. She had no choice. Finally, they arrived at a small clearing and Amaka gasped when she saw what lay before her, a sleek black SUV. The convoy was parked in the middle of the clearing. Several men in black suits stood beside the vehicles. Their postures were firm and professional. They moved quickly, surrounding David with an almost military precision. Amaka stood frozen, confused and frightened. David turned to her, his face softening for the first time since they had left the village. Don't worry, you're safe now, he said. Safe? How could she be safe? She was standing in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by strangers who were acting like they knew exactly what was happening. Amaka's mind raced with possibilities. None of them good. One of the men in the black suits approached David, nodding respectfully. Everything is ready, sir. David nodded in return and turned back to Amaka. Come on, we need to get in the car. Amaka hesitated, fear twisting in her chest. What's happening? Where are you taking me? David looked at her, his expression calm. Just trust me. I'm here to help you. Please come with me. Amaka's mind was a whirlwind of confusion. But for some reason, she felt that she had no choice but to follow him. What else could she do? She had been abandoned by her stepmother, forced into a marriage with a man she didn't know, and now she was standing in the middle of a forest unsure of what would happen next. Reluctantly, she followed David to the SUV. The door opened and one of the men inside gestured for her to get in. Amaka climbed into the back seat, her heart pounding in her chest. David slid in beside her and the car began to move. As they drove, Amaka couldn't help but glance at David. He seemed so calm, so composed while she was falling apart inside. How could he be so sure of everything? Why did he seem to know what was happening? Who was he really? David, she said, her voice trembling. Who are you? David turned to her, his eyes dark but not unkind. I told you, I'm here to help you. I'm David Jonathan, CEO of David's Automobile Company. Amaka blinked. CEO? A CEO of a company? She had never imagined that the homeless man who had been sent to marry her could be anyone important. But now, hearing the truth from his lips, it only made her more confused. Why did you pretend to be homeless? She asked. David sighed, his expression turning serious. Because I knew that your stepmother wouldn't have agreed to help you otherwise. She didn't see you as a person, just a burden. But I saw your story, Amaka. I knew what you were going through. I couldn't stand by and watch you be treated like that. Amaka's mind spun. She had been so sure that her life was over, that she had no future. But now, here she was, sitting in a black SUV with a man who, despite his initial appearance, seemed to be her savior. David continued, I heard about you from one of my drivers. He came from your village and when he told me your story, I knew I had to do something. So I set all of this up. I wanted to help you escape your stepmother's cruelty. Amaka couldn't believe it. After everything she had been through, after the humiliation, the rejection and the pain, someone was finally offering her a lifeline. David glanced at her again, his voice softening. You don't deserve what's happened to you, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. I promise. Amaka sat back in her seat, her head swimming. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Was this some kind of trick? Was she being used? Or was David truly someone who wanted to help her? The car continued to speed through the untarred road. Amaka couldn't help but wonder what awaited her at the end of this journey. Would this man really be the one to change her life, or would he simply be another chapter in her already tragic story? The car turned onto a winding road, and as they drove deeper, Amaka's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden realization. She didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was certain: her life had just taken an unexpected turn. The car drove on through the day, and with each passing mile, Amaka's uncertainty grew. She kept glancing at David sitting beside her, but she still couldn't fully comprehend who he was or what he really wanted from her. He was kind, sure, but she had learned the hard way not to trust kindness. She had trusted her stepmother's false promises once before, and that had led her to this nightmare. What if David was just another person playing some cruel game? Where are we going? Amaka's voice trembled, breaking the silence in the car. David turned to her, his gaze steady and calm. We're going to a place where you'll be safe. You've been through enough, and I won't let anything bad happen to you. I just need you to trust me. Trust you? Amaka whispered, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. How can I trust anyone anymore? Everyone who's supposed to care for me has abandoned me. My stepmother, my father, even my own mother died and left only me to suffer. No one has ever cared. Why should I believe you? David's expression softened. And for the first time, Amaka noticed the weariness in his eyes. Because I'm not like them, Amaka. I don't want anything from you. I just want to help you. Could it be true? Could someone really want to help her without expecting anything in return? Or was it just another trap? The car made a sharp turn and Amaka was jolted out of her thoughts. They arrived at a large gated property in Lekki, Lagos, surrounded by tall trees and high walls. It looked like something out of a dream, far too grand for someone like her, someone who had grown up in a small village, a life of humble means. Where are we? Amaka asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowed the car down as they approached the entrance. The gates opened automatically, revealing a beautifully landscaped yard with fountains and sculptures dotting the lush grounds. The house itself was enormous, with large glass windows that sparkled under the moonlight, reflecting the grandeur of a mansion. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, something she could never have imagined in her wildest dreams. The car stopped in front of the mansion and David turned to her. Welcome to my home. Amaka could only stare in shock, her mouth dry. This is your home? She asked, the words tumbling out of her mouth before she could stop them. But how? You said you were homeless. David smiled faintly. I wasn't lying, but I needed to gain your trust. I know this all seems strange, but the truth is, I've been keeping a low profile. People have tried to take advantage of me before, and I've learned that sometimes it's better to hide in plain sight. Amaka's mind raced. She didn't know what to believe anymore. This was the last thing she expected when she had walked away from her father's house, fleeing from the cruelty of her stepmother. She had thought she was being thrown away, discarded by everyone she loved, only to be handed over to a stranger. And now here she was, standing in front of a mansion with a man who seemed to be hiding some kind of secret. David opened the door and led her out of the car. Come, let me show you inside. Amaka hesitated for a moment, but something in David's voice urged her to follow. Maybe she didn't have to understand everything right away. Maybe she didn't have to know all the answers. The inside of the house was even more breathtaking. The floors were polished marble, and the walls were lined with beautiful artwork. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and soft music played in the background. Everything was pristine, like something out of a magazine. Amaka could hardly believe this was real. She felt out of place, as though she didn't belong in such a luxurious place. She had never seen anything like this in her life. David led her to a comfortable sitting room and gestured for her to sit. "I'll have some food brought up for you. You must be hungry." Amaka didn't respond immediately. She just sat there, staring at the large windows that overlooked the expansive grounds. Her mind was still in a whirlwind of confusion. How could this be real? What was the catch? As she sat in silence, David moved to a nearby desk, where he picked up his phone and began typing something. He paused for a moment, then turned back to her. "I've arranged for a doctor to see you tomorrow," he said. "You need proper care, especially with your pregnancy. I don't want you to worry about anything. You're safe here, Amaka, and I'll make sure nothing bad happens to you again." Amaka nodded quietly, trying to process everything. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But after everything she had been through, it was hard to imagine that things could actually get better. As she sat there staring at the vast room around her, she thought about her father. He had been gone for so long, and she couldn't help but wonder if he would ever return. She thought about her mother too, the mother who had been poisoned by her stepmother, the woman who had caused her so much pain. As she sat there, her mind went back to how her pain started. And now, she's inside a mansion where she doesn't even know. Her thoughts were interrupted when a man entered the room carrying a tray of food. He placed it in front of her, and Amaka's stomach growled in response. She hadn't eaten in hours, maybe longer. She didn't feel hungry, but she knew she needed to eat. David stood in the doorway, watching her. "Go ahead, eat. You need to take care of yourself." Amaka glanced at the food, but her mind was still elsewhere. She knew she had to eat, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the past she couldn't escape, the past that haunted her. David saw the uncertainty in her eyes and walked over, sitting down across from her. "I know it's hard, Amaka, but I want you to understand something. I'm not here to hurt you. Everything that's happened to you, I want to make it right." Amaka looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion. "But why? Why me?" David paused, his eyes serious. "Because I see the strength in you, Amaka. You've been through so much and you're still standing. That's not something I see every day. You deserve better than what you've been given, and I'm going to make sure you get it." For the first time in a long while, Amaka felt a spark of hope. It was a fragile hope, one that she could hardly believe in. But it was there. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Maybe she could find a way out of this dark, endless tunnel. But as she reached for the food on the tray, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was never truly behind her. It was lurking, waiting, and no matter how far she ran, it might just catch up with her. In the following days, Amaka started going to the hospital for the antenatal care David registered for her. 1 month after she gave birth, 2 nannies were hired to take care of her and her baby. After 8 months, Amaka was registered back in school while her son continued to grow. But tragedy struck one day. It was at night. The baby was crying and then suddenly began to choke. Mr. David rushed to her room and quickly called the driver to take them to the hospital. But before they arrived, little Obina was gone. He was dead, cold and lifeless in Amaka's hand. She was 14, and there, she wanted to kill herself too. She had developed a strong affection for her son and had secretly prayed for him to be part of her story. But now, he's gone. When they returned home with the corpse of little Obina, David quickly took him from her and consoled her. In the morning, Obina was buried. Thereafter, Amaka decided to end it all. She was about to stab herself in her room when Mr. David entered and stopped her. After several efforts, she decided to move on, hoping life would be kind to her going forward. Months passed, and with each day, Amaka's life began to take shape. The weight of her past was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer controlled her. She was free. She had survived the cruelty, the abandonment, the betrayal, and the pain of losing her son. Amaka's life, however, was just beginning. With the support of David and the newfound freedom, she was determined to carve out her own path. For the first time, she felt like she had control over her future. It started small, with a simple decision to go back to school. Amaka had always been bright, but after everything that had happened in her life, she had been forced to grow up too quickly, leaving her dreams in the dust. Now, with the freedom to pursue those dreams, she returned to school and graduated from high school. She enrolled in computer science courses and quickly discovered a passion for software development. What had initially been a way to escape her pain slowly transformed into a career. Amaka poured herself into coding, learning as much as she could, working tirelessly into the late hours of the night. And slowly but surely, she built a reputation for herself. Within a few years, she graduated as a software engineer, one of the few who had emerged from such a painful past even stronger. She used her success to uplift others who had once been left behind, just as she had been. Amaka founded a non-profit organization focused on helping underprivileged people, particularly those in need of critical surgeries. Her foundation worked tirelessly to raise funds for life-saving treatments, becoming her mission, her way of healing others, just as she had been healed. One afternoon, while working at her office, her assistant entered with unexpected news. "Amaka," she said hesitantly. "There's someone here to see you. It's your father." Amaka's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen her father in years. When her mother died, he had been away working, and after that, she was left in the cruel hands of Amara. She had no idea where he had been all this time. The thought of him stirred a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and yet, a lingering sense of hope. "Let him in," Amaka said, her voice steady, though her insides churned with uncertainty. Mr. Andrew stepped into the office. His face, weathered with age, still carried the strength of a man who had been through hard times. His eyes softened when he saw her, and without saying a word, he collapsed into her arms. Amaka felt the weight of everything she had endured in that moment, the years of pain, the longing, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the love that had been missing for so long. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I failed you. I couldn't protect you from her. I've been searching for you all these years, but I couldn't find you. I never stopped looking." Amaka's heart ached as she held him. The pain of their lost years mixed with the joy of being reunited. "I'm glad you're here," she said softly. "But there's something I need to tell you, Dad." Mr. Andrew pulled back slightly, concern shadowing his face. "What is it, Amaka?" She took a deep breath and told him everything, about Amara's role in her mother's death, the torment, and the years of abuse she endured. It was a hard truth, but one she could no longer keep buried. "And there's one more thing," she added, her voice steady. "The woman who caused all this. Amara, she's here. You brought her here." Mr. Andrew looked confused. "Amara? I brought her here?" Amaka stood, her hands trembling slightly. "She's the one who needs help now. Your wife, my stepmother, has been diagnosed with an eye tumor. She can't afford the surgery. And the doctors say it's critical. I'm the one who can save her." Her father stood in stunned silence, trying to absorb the weight of her words. "You want to help her?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. Amaka nodded. "Yes. I know she was cruel to me. I know what she did to my mother. But I've built this foundation to help those in need, and that includes her. You might not understand, but this is my chance to repay her evil with kindness. Not for her sake, but so she can finally see what I've become, the little girl she tried so hard to destroy. If I don't help, she'll die without ever seeing the result of her cruelty. Mr. Andrews stood silent, emotions churning across his face. Then he nodded, tears forming in his eyes. Okay, he whispered. If you say so. A few hours after Amaka made the payment, the surgery was done successfully. When Amara's bandages were removed, she looked around the room and saw Amaka standing in front of her. In that moment, she could no longer hide behind the walls of cruelty she had built. But peace was short-lived. A week later, devastating news arrived. Amara, unable to bear the weight of her guilt and the haunting mockery of her past, had taken her own life. The woman who had once tried to destroy Amaka had succumbed to the demons she herself had created. Amaka sat in her office, eyes fixed on the window, the news slowly sinking in. She didn't feel relief. She didn't feel joy. What she felt was quiet, painful understanding, that some people, no matter how much time they're given, cannot escape their past. But Amaka was not like Amara. She had faced her past. She had confronted her pain. And in doing so, she found a way to rise above it. She had built a life full of hope, not bitterness. And that, in the end, was her greatest victory. Over the years, Amaka's foundation expanded, helping thousands receive critical surgeries and build better lives. Her work as a software engineer flourished, and she became a beacon of hope, proof that pain could be transformed into purpose. More importantly, Amaka had found peace with her past, with her mother's memory, and even with the woman who had once tried to destroy her. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Amaka visited her mother's grave. She knelt by the headstone and whispered through tears, "Rest in peace, Mama. I've become everything you wanted me to be. She couldn't destroy me. She couldn't erase your memory or your love." Her story inspired many, but it didn't end there. David, who had stood beside her through it all as a single father after the loss of his wife, decided to officially marry Amaka. Their wedding became the talk of media stations across the country, a celebration of love, strength, and new beginnings. Together, they raised beautiful children, teaching them not just to be strong, but to be kind, even in the face of cruelty. Now, I ask you, if you were in Amaka's shoes, would you have paid for Amara's surgery? Could you show kindness to someone who once shattered your world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And tell us, where are you watching from? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. Sometimes, healing begins not by forgetting the past, but by rewriting its ending.